So every December, the same exact thing happens. I look at my story graph like it's a tax document, and suddenly I'm bargaining with myself. If I just read 70 pages tonight and 40 pages tomorrow and 50 pages the next day and then skip sleeping entirely, and it just becomes this whole messy equation. I'm doing long division to figure out if I'm going to hit my reading goal. I don't even like math. And yes, I know we gave up numerical reading goals for 2025, but some of us can't let it go. So it's December. We're staring down the new year. And here's the truth. I am not in my long book era right now. I am, in fact, barely in my medium book era. The holidays are chaos, work is demanding, the sun sets at noon, and my attention span has essentially filed for unemployment. I am currently held together by caffeine, vibes, and those weird peppermint pretzel things from Costco that are delicious and yet strangely cost effective. So yes, sometimes, Virginia, the answer is a slim book. A book you can actually finish before January. A book that lets you feel like a person who completes things. And that's not cheating. That's strategy. Because reading isn't a competition. It's a practice. And sometimes the kindest thing that we can do for ourselves is pick up a book that meets us where we are, not where we think we should be. I'm Nick. This is Dr. Cranky Pants Reads, and today we're talking slim books you can read in a sitting or two. Books that respect your time, your brain, and your rapidly diminishing holiday bandwidth. I've got 5 tiny powerhouses that deliver mood, meaning, and that sweet, I finished something dopamine hit. Despite what you may be thinking, because of the theme music, it has lied to you. I am not suddenly more energetic. I am still the same December version of myself. Tired, caffeinated, and just trying to do my best. But these books actually deserve whatever flicker of attention span you've got left. They're short, they're sharp, and they won't punish you for being a human being in the final weeks of the year. So let's get into them. We're going to start with the quiet one, because I think a lot of us might need the quiet one right now. This is Fair Play by Tove Jansson, and it's a slim book about 2 older women, Marie and Jonah, who live and work at opposite ends of an apartment building near the harbor. Between their studios, there is this long attic corridor. Jansson calls it an impersonal no man's land, and Mari loves walking across it. She listens to the rain on the metal roof, looks out over the city as the lights come on, or just lingers because that in-between space matters. And that, right there, that is the whole book in miniature. It is about the spaces between people who love each other and still need room to work, to think, to be themselves. Marie is a writer and illustrator. Jonah is a filmmaker and visual artist. They are based very closely on Jansson herself and her partner, Tuliki Pieltia. I just butchered that, Joanna, I'm sorry, who shared a life and an island for decades. And this book moves between their harbor apartments and their tiny cabin on a rock in the Finnish archipelago. So sometimes they have this luxurious distance with an attic buffering them. And sometimes they are literally on top of one another in a one-room cabin in the middle of the sea. And what Jansson does with that setup is quietly radical. This is not a book about a relationship falling apart. It is not artists who destroy each other for the sake of art. Instead, it is 17 small vignettes about 2 women who have somehow figured out how to love each other and keep working. They watch Fassbinder movies instead of going to dinner parties. They argue about stories and woodcuts and bee westerns. They quarrel about a gull being shot on the island. They sulk. They whittle. They feed the cat. And then they go back to their reading. And one of my favorite details is that they never ask each other, "Were you able to work today?" Jansen writes that maybe they did 20 or 30 years earlier, but they learned not to. There are empty spaces that must be respected, she says. Those stretches when someone cannot find the words or see the picture and just needs to be left alone. So if you are a creative person, that line hurts a little, but in the best way possible. Because she gets it. She understands how fragile that space is and how much love it takes to leave it undisturbed. This is a perfect end of year book if you're tired of drama, you're tired of couples in fiction who destroy each other or have no interior life. If you're tired of artist stories that pretend the only way to be serious is to be alone. Fair Play says, actually, you can have work and love in the same life. It is not flashy, it is not easy, but it is possible. And it is especially good if you are someone who has been holding yourself to intense reading goals all year, because this book is forgiving. The chapters are short. You can read one vignette before bed and feel like you got a complete little story. Or you can sit down on a December afternoon with a cup of tea, read the whole thing in a few hours, and feel like you spent time with two actual people. It is also, quietly, a queer book about older women whose lives are not treated as tragedy or spectacle. There is no big coming out scene, no sensationalism. Just two women in their 70s who make art, who travel, who grumble about each other's tastes in movies, rearrange each other's pictures on the wall, and keep choosing each other. So, if you're a reader who is craving something calm, but not empty, reflective, but not faux deep, Fair Play is that book. It is small, it is clean, and it is immensely rereadable. You can bring it into this tired, chaotic stretch of the year and let it remind you that steadiness still exists. That partnership can be kind. That the attic between two studios can be as important as any grand declaration. And in terms of page count, it absolutely qualifies as, I can finish this before the end of the year. But it also does that rare thing that short books sometimes do. It feels bigger on the inside. It's like the literary equivalent of a TARDIS. If you want to start this little stack of slim reads with something that will lower your shoulders and still light up your brain, start here. Now, the next book is James Baldwin's No Name in the Street, and this is one I've actually talked about on the channel before. But if you're looking for a short, end-of-year read that actually means something, this is the one I'd push into your hands. This book was published in 1972, 9 years after The Fire Next Time, and you can feel those 9 years in every sentence. That earlier book had room for hope, and this one doesn't pretend anymore. Baldwin has watched the civil rights movement push forward legally and then get gutted emotionally. He has buried his friends, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and that grief sits in the marrow of this book. If The Fire Next Time is Baldwin standing at the pulpit trying to convince America it can be better, No Name in the Streets is Baldwin standing in the rubble saying, I told you the house was on fire. And what's incredible and what makes it such a powerful short read is how personal it is. This is not a policy analysis. It's not a historical overview. It is Baldwin thinking and feeling in real time. He moves between Harlem, Hollywood, Europe, Alabama, and back again. And the thread that ties it all together is sorrow turning into clarity. His rage is not chaotic. It is earned. And reading it now in a world that is still wrestling with the same cycles of violence, the same political theater, the same hypocrisy, you feel that clarity in your bones. This is also the Baldwin book where the writing gets looser, more elastic. His sentences sometimes run wild with commas because his thoughts are spilling over. He's not packaging this for a skeptical white liberal readership anymore. He isn't trying to sound acceptable. He is telling the truth for the people who already know it. And there are moments of writing in this book that are astonishing. One of my favorites comes right at the beginning where he says, "Every human being is an uncontested miracle." And then immediately warns you to protect yourself from the disasters people become. That mixture of both faith and realism, of love shaded by anger, is exactly what this book is made of. Now, here's why I think this book works so well as a late December read. Because you can finish it in a weekend, but you will feel like you read something with weight. It resets your internal compass. You don't walk away uplifted, you walk away awake. If you have spent the year reading fiction, or even if you've read a lot of fluffy, comforting things, Baldwin is the perfect book to shift your brain into a different register. He doesn't lecture you. He doesn't assign blame. He just refuses to look away. And that's its own kind of courage. And if you're someone who's been thinking a lot about politics, or injustice, or how history repeats itself, this book hits especially hard. Baldwin isn't just talking about what happened. He's talking about the systems that made those events inevitable. He's talking about America's refusal to account for itself. He's talking about what violence does to a person, not just theoretically, but because he felt it in his own life. What I also love here, and what makes it pair beautifully with a short book's video, is that Baldwin never wastes your time. Even when the structure meanders, the force is direct. You feel like you're sitting across from him and he's telling you what the world looks like without the polite filter on. So if you want a slim book with teeth, a book that tests your moral attention in the best way possible, a book that doesn't comfort but clarifies, No Name in the Street is that book. It is Baldwin at his most wounded and therefore his most honest. And at the end of the year, that kind of honesty can feel like a reset button. You finish knowing something you didn't know before. Not because he taught it to you, but because he refused to let you turn away from it. The next book we're going to talk about on this list is We the Animals by Justin Torres. And this one hits differently. If Fair Play is quiet companionship and Baldwin is moral clarity, We the Animals is the emotional punch to the ribs you didn't see coming. It is short, yes, but it is not small. This is a book that moves fast, hits hard, and leaves a mark. We're in upstate New York, the not at all romantic kind. You're in a house full of boys, 3 brothers who move through the world like one creature, all instinct and hunger and noise. And their parents are young and exhausted and working too much and fighting too loudly. The father is Puerto Rican, the mother is white, and they love each other with a kind of ferocity that spills over in every direction, into joy, into violence, into the boys themselves. And Torres tells this story in fragments, not chapters so much as flashes, scenes lit up one at a time like memory itself. You're not getting the full biography of this family. You're getting the moments that burned hot enough to survive. And that structure is what makes this such a powerful end of year read, because you can take one vignette at a time and still feel like you're sinking into something real. You do not need a perfect attention span for this book. You just need to show up for the next page. The writing is going to carry you, because that writing is extraordinary. Sharp, lyrical, sometimes brutal, sometimes tender. Torres has that gift for finding the exact sensory detail that puts you in the room. The boys banging their forks for more, the father's precise, ritualistic spankings, the mother's exhaustion, so heavy it becomes atmospheric. It's that kind of prose that makes you stop because it lands, not because it confuses you. But what makes this book especially resonant and what makes it pair so beautifully with Lie With Me Later is the emotional divide that slowly emerges. The narrator starts the book inside the we of the title. He is one of the boys, one body in this three-headed animal of a family. But as the book moves, he becomes an I. He becomes a kid who feels things differently, who sees things differently, who wants things differently. It's a quiet shift, and then it isn't. And readers who grew up in families where you loved the people who scared you, or where you had to carve out space for the self you were becoming, will feel that shift like a key turning in a lock. And for queer readers, there is another layer. The narrator's sexuality doesn't appear as a neat revelation. It comes as a fracture, a rupture, a moment where wanting becomes dangerous in a household already overflowing with volatility. It is handled with restraint, but it is unmistakably there. Not loud, but insistent. So who is this book for right now? It's perfect for readers who want a short book that doesn't feel slight. For readers who like fiction told through images rather than explanation. For people who want to feel something raw, but not be dragged through a 500-page trauma novel. A Little Life, looking at you. For anyone who loves language and wants to see what a writer can do in 125 pages with nothing but clarity and compression. This is also a great pick if your reading year has felt safe or predictable and you want one book that pushes you a little bit. Not in a punishing way, but in a wake something up kind of way. Because when you finish We the Animals, you don't really think about the plot. You think about the impact. You think about the scene or the image or the sentence that lodged itself under your skin. You think about how a writer this precise could take a chaotic, violent, loving family and make you see every contradiction at once. It is visceral, it is beautiful, it is quick, and it earns every page it has. So if you want your next short read to have teeth, this is the one. My next book is Lie With Me by Philippe Bisson. And this is one of those rare little novels that feels like it was poured straight out of someone's memory. It is short, one afternoon kind of short. I read it over the weekend a couple of weeks ago, all 148 pages of it, and just sat there afterward thinking, well, that was a lot. It is quiet, but it's not light. It's spare, but it's not simple. This is the kind of book that reminds you how much emotional voltage you can pack into a slim page count. And yes, it really is translated by Molly Ringwald. Yes, that Molly Ringwald. The one you're picturing from The Breakfast Club. I know. But here's the thing. She's good. This translation is clean, readable, and captures that distinctly French mix of restraint and heat underneath the surface. The book opens with the narrator, also named Felipe, being interviewed in a hotel bar. And with that first line, you know exactly what you're getting. A man who is about to tell the truth for the first time, maybe to himself most of all. The whole novel is framed as him finally facing the relationship that has shaped him, the one he's been writing about for decades. The heart of this book takes us back to 1984. Small town France, rural, conservative, silent about anything that falls outside of the norm. This is not a setting where two 17-year-old boys get to fall in love safely. And Besson doesn't pretend otherwise. The atmosphere is tight, the stakes are real, and that tension gives the book its charge. Our narrator has always known he was gay. He knew early and he knew to hide it. School is a place where he keeps his head down, stays in the right classes, follows the expectations placed on a headmaster's son. Thomas, on the other hand, comes from a farming family. He's handsome, self-possessed, painfully aware of the limits placed on boys like him. And these two exist in two totally separate social worlds. They do not speak, they do not make eye contact. And then one day, Thomas asks Felipe to meet him in secret. And what follows is a relationship that is as intense as it is impossible. Secret meetings in neglected corners of the school, a shed near the football field, eventually Felipe's bedroom. There is desire, but there's also fear, shame, and class. Thomas knows he cannot leave his world, and Felipe knows he must. The difference in how they imagine their futures becomes the difference in how they imagine themselves. And this is what Besson does so well. He shows you two boys who want the same thing but cannot want it the same way. And Felipe is desperate to hold on. Thomas is desperate to not be seen. And the gap between those two instincts is where the heartbreak lives. Because we know from the beginning, this relationship does not survive. It can't. And yet every page feels alive with the urgency of it wanting to. One of the things people have talked about with this book is whether it's fiction or memoir, because Besson sets it in a small town he grew up in. He dedicates it to a real Thomas Andrieux. He writes the adult Felipe with this raw confessional honesty. It feels like a memory you've been trusted with. And the writing is so clean, no flourishes, no indulgence, just short, declarative sentences that hit harder because they're so unadorned. This is a book that knows exactly what it's doing and doesn't waste time pretending otherwise. It works beautifully as a short end-of-year read because it gives you complexity without heaviness, emotion without exhaustion. If you want something that will make you feel connected to your younger self, or if you like queer stories that treat first love with respect rather than sensationalism, this is your pick. You can read it in about 3 hours and think about it for weeks. It's tender, it's sharp, and it's honest in a way that only hindsight can be. And it reminds you that the relationships that break us a little are often the ones that form us the most. And our last book is for the reader who wants something strange. Not wacky strange, not sci-fi spectacle strange. I mean, the kind of strange that sits behind your eyes for a week and makes you reconsider your relationship to time, memory, and maybe even your spouse. We are ending with On the Calculation of Volume, Volume 1 by Slippage. I hope I said that right. This book has a Groundhog Day premise, yes, but it is nothing like a Groundhog Day book. Tara Selter, an antiquarian bookseller, wakes up one morning and realizes she has been living November 18th over and over and over again. And unlike in the movies, nobody else is looping with her. Her husband Thomas wakes up each day freshly unaware. The world around her resets completely, except Tara doesn't. Her hair keeps growing. Her burn injury keeps healing. The cupboards stay empty if she empties them. But if Thomas empties the cupboards, they reset overnight. That distinction, ghost or monster, as the novel puts it, becomes one of the book's quiet obsessions. She begins tracking every tiny inconsistency with scientific precision. Which objects persist, which vanish, which can be persuaded to stay if they're held closely enough or noticed carefully enough. And this is part of why this book is so compelling as a short read. It feels like a diary written by someone who is both unraveling and becoming razor sharp. The prose is clean, philosophical, and at times almost mathematical, but never cold. You feel Tara watching the world with a kind of desperate clarity. If nothing else moves forward, then noticing becomes the only form of motion she has. And that's what I love here. That's why I'm recommending it as a final book in this little stack, is that this is a story about time that ends up being a story about intimacy. At the beginning of the loop, Tara and Thomas are still connected, still moving together emotionally, even when time refuses to move around them. But as loops accumulate, they slip out of sync. Tara changes. Thomas doesn't. And the tragedy of the book is not the loop itself. It's the way time wedges itself into a marriage even when time isn't supposed to exist. There's a sequence where Tara decides to simply live in the spare room, quietly, so Thomas can keep having his day without the burden of hearing the same impossible story again. She listens to him move throughout the house like she's a ghost in her own life. And you feel the ache of that. The wanting to be with someone while protecting them from your own unraveling. This is a book for readers who love a philosophical novel but don't want to be assigned a dissertation. Yes, there are existential questions, ideas about free will and absurdity, nods to quantum physics and block universe theory, but it never becomes a lecture. The thinking grows out of Tara's experience, out of her boredom, out of her grief, out of the human instinct to ask why, even when the answer is clearly, infuriatingly, there is no why. And the writing, especially in Barbara Havlin's translation, is deceptively simple, clean, rhythmic. You can absolutely read it in an afternoon, but your brain will keep turning it over because this book is doing that Pyrrhic thing, teaching you to notice the infraordinary, the small details of a supposedly identical day, the way a passerby drops a piece of bread at the exact same moment each loop, the angle of light, the sound of footsteps, the question of what remains and what doesn't. It's also weirdly the perfect December read if you've ever looked up from your life and thought, wait, didn't I just do this? The same commute, the same errands, the same meetings, the same conversations, the way days can blur into each other until they lose their edges. Tara's loop becomes a metaphor for the rest of us, who may not be looping technically, but are certainly looping emotionally. And maybe that's why this book is the perfect place to land at the end of this video. It is short, it is strange, it is smart without being smug. It asks big questions without pretending it can answer them. And it leaves you in exactly the right mood heading into a new year. Awake to your life, aware of your time, and curious about the possibilities that still exist, even on the days that feel like reruns. If you want to end your reading year with something that shakes your snow globe a little, gently but insistently, On the Calculation of Volume, Volume 1 is the one. So that's the stack. 5 small books that don't demand a whole new personality from you in December, but will absolutely give you something to think about as we move into January. We started with Fair Play, because honestly, that's the kind of energy I want in the new year. Steady relationships, creative lives unfolding without chaos, the attic corridor between you and the people you love. Like, seriously, is that not the dream? And then we stepped into Baldwin, who reminds you bluntly, urgently, that clarity isn't comfort, but it is necessary. We the Animals cracked something open, that shift from we to I, that childhood intensity that shapes you long after you've left. Lie With Me gave us a different kind of remembering, quieter and more adult. A first love you carried but can never return to. And then On the Calculation of Volume reminded us that time is uncooperative, and also maybe the thing we understand least. And here's the thing, you don't have to read any of these. There is no prize for finishing the year with a big number or a perfect spreadsheet. But there is a real pleasure, a real satisfaction in finishing something small that actually moves you. Something that feels complete. Something that doesn't bully your attention span into a corner. If you're looking for a way to close out your reading year or start the next one with a little momentum, this stack will absolutely do the job. Pick one, pick all 5, read them in order or let your mood decide. They each offer a different kind of clarity, a different way of looking at your life, a different invitation, if you will. And as always, if you've read any of these or you have other slim, punchy books you think I should add to my annual My Brain is Tired pile, tell me in the comments. I love a good short book recommendation. As always, thanks for being here. I appreciate you, and I hope life is good. I'll see you in the next one.